Good evening, everyone. My name is Jada Stainhouse, and I'm proud to be the Digital Programming and Marketing Assistant at the FirstOntario Performing Arts Centre. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for another edition of Local Reflections on Racism. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the FirstOntario Performing Arts Centre is located in downtown St. Catharines on the shared traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, the Neutral Peoples, and many other Indigenous people from across Turtle Island. We offer our sincere gratitude and respect to the original and continued stewards of the land. We also acknowledge Black, Indigenous, people of color, and 2S LGBTQIA+ people that have been marginalized for centuries and more, and our collective responsibility to take action for a better world free from oppression, discrimination, and racism. This programming is a part of an ongoing monthly virtual series in partnership with the PAC, the Niagara Folk Arts Multicultural Centre, and the Niagara Region Anti-Racism Association. The FirstOntario PAC aims to provide meaningful opportunities to bring our community together in a place of mutual understanding, empathy, and respect through the arts. Tonight's program has been supported by the Canada Council for the Arts Digital Strategies Fund. This evening, we will have a panel of local athletes and coaches share their experiences of racism throughout their lives and careers, followed by a performance by Tabitha Lewis. Please feel free to interact using the comment section throughout the program. With that, I am very excited to announce our moderator for tonight, Charles Kissi. Charles holds a Master's of Education and has been a guest lecturer at Brock University, where he most recently presented on bias and systemic issues in education. He also spent 5 years at Brock developing the men's basketball program and currently serves as the general manager and head coach of the Guelph Nighthawks in the Canadian Elite Basketball League. He sits on the board of the Layup Foundation, an organization that provides youth from some of Toronto's priority neighborhoods with holistic educational opportunities through basketball. Over the past 2 years, Charles has been the lead assistant coach for the Raptors 905 team in the NBA G League. And before coaching professionally, he spent 10 years as a Toronto police officer. And if that isn't enough, he most recently co-founded Equity Connections Incorporated, a company that works with various organizations such as police services and educational institutions to facilitate training and education in the areas of equity, diversity, and inclusion. So let me bring Charles up here. Hello, hello.
Hello, hello. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Great.
Happy to have you on.
Great to be here. It's absolutely great to be here. Thank you so much, Jada. Let me start first by thanking FirstOntario Performing Arts Centre in partnership, as you mentioned, with the Folk Arts Centre and the Niagara Region Anti-Racism Association. So important for us to be having these local reflections on racism and having these conversations. And I'm honored to be the moderator for tonight.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, I'll pass it over to you and I'll see you in a bit.
Enjoy. Okay, let's begin. Welcome, everybody. And I hope you enjoy the next 45 minutes to an hour with us. I think you're going to find we're going to have some great conversation, some things that, maybe you're taking notes and maybe some things you haven't thought about, maybe some things that sort of turn the light bulb on. And as my podcast would say, make you think about it. So I'm excited. Let's jump into our first guest. Our first guest, Antwi Atuahene, is from Toronto. He's the Assistant General Manager of the Niagara River Lions. He's also the General Manager of the Mississauga Tigers High Performance Program. Antwi's played professional basketball for 8 years, graduated in 2009 from Arizona State University, where he obtained a degree in mass communications and business. He has founded way too many organizations, but I'll give you a few. The Youth Are Us organization in 2012, and he's also the president of Nawal organization. Antwi is an unbelievable human being, as you're about to find out. Motivator, communicator, listener, just a trendsetter and a culture builder. Antwi, welcome.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Amazing intro. I'm excited to be here and share some of my thoughts with everyone here.
We're excited to have you. Next up, Elijah Roberts. Some of you may have watched him play. The 21-year-old from Brampton is currently a student at Ryerson University, playing on the men's hockey team there. played 5 years in the OHL, 2 for Kitchener and 3 for our very own Niagara Ice Dogs here, and really enjoyed his time here. Over his career, he's compiled over 108 points, 85 assists. And I kind of think about that. I say, man, I haven't compiled that in my time at McMaster playing basketball and men's league for post university. He's had an unbelievable career. Also part of the U17 national team that won gold in the World Championships. Participated on our U18 team as well, and recently dove into some podcast hosting with a podcast called Soul on Ice, which he hosts alongside Akil Thomas and Kwame Mason. So, Elijah, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm really excited about the conversations we're going to get going. And when Jada reached out to me, I jumped at the idea, and I'm happy to be a part of this.
We're happy to have you. Happy to have you. And last but not least, Billy D. Smith, St. Catharines native, currently the assistant coach of the Halifax Thunderbirds in the NLL, the National Lacrosse League. He was drafted 3rd overall by the Buffalo Bandits in 2002. He's played 15 seasons. Say that again, 15 seasons of professional lacrosse. Was the champion in 2008. Hope he got a big ring. And Defensive Player of the Year in 2009. He's been a gold medal winner for Canada. He's got again, this is a super accomplished panel. So many accolades as far as championships and medals and honors. One of my favorite things as we dive in, and an interesting stat for me, is that he is the all-time penalty leader in the NLL with 669 minutes. Now, why is that interesting to me? On 2 fronts. One, we all like penalties. It's funny, whatever. But there's the other end of it, which is part of what we're going to talk about today. So, gentlemen, welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
We will start with one of my favorite sort of role models, one of super inspirational human being, and Nelson Mandela, who said that sport has the power to change the world. It has the power to inspire. It has the power to unite people in a way that little else does. And obviously, I think everyone who's watching at home, and certainly everyone on this panel, would agree with that. But let's talk about the other end, and 2 misconceptions before I jump into my first question for you guys. The first misconception is that racism does not exist in Canada. It exists in the U.S., right? There's this notion that, the U.S. is way worse, or the U.S. has it and we don't, because we see the overt acts, we see the Trump and all the carryings on there. But we should acknowledge, and we're going to talk through this, the systemic nature, obviously, and some of the acts, in terms of microaggressions and so on. And we got to also appreciate that the Canada's had a history of racism, right? As open and as multicultural as we are, there is a past, and it's not just a history, it continues today. The second piece, back to Nelson Mandela's quote, is the idea that, as much as sport can be a unifier, it can also be divisive. So we're going to sort of start there. When you look at the NBA, I thought this, through the social justice movement, they made it very clear where they stood in trying to unify their athletes and trying to unify people around, the messages of social justice and race and so on. But then on the flip side of that, you found, and let's be clear, that divided people. The NFL's, when you think back, years ago, it's really been happening in the NFL for years, but it divided people. And then you had the NHL that sort of balked and dragged its feet a little bit, not a little bit, a lot, in terms of the issues and how they felt and sort of expressed this willful blindness. So with that said, because again, there was definitely some division. With that said, Elijah, I'm going to start with you. Okay. Tell us a little bit about your first and earliest experiences with racism related to your sport.
So for me, no one in my family really played hockey. It was just my one cousin. Everyone else played basketball, soccer, track, you name it, every other sport. And for me, I just watched my cousin play a couple times. My dad thought it'd be a great idea to get me involved, but I think my first experience with racism started with him when my dad talked to me about how my cousin would get bananas thrown at him and dealt with a lot of racism. And at a young age, he kind of sat me down and was like, you need to kind of prepare yourself that if you want to play this sport, this is something that you might go through down the road. So for me, it started that young. And then for me, I was fortunate enough to have one of my best friends to this day always play on my team, another Black player. But other than that, you walk into a change room, you walk to a new team, and you look around and there's all white kids, and you don't really see anyone that looks like you. And right away you see they stare at you, they look at you a little different, and it's hard. But over time you kind of learn to adjust to that. And it sucks that sometimes you see them staring and you ask why are they staring at me like that? Like, I don't get it. But yeah, I think that's just when it all started out for me.
It's interesting. And you talked about your dad having to sort of warn you. And for those watching, you think about, your kids playing in sports. Have you ever had to warn them about what was coming because of their race, not having anything to do with their talent and ability? And, my daughter wants to get into acting, and I say, hey, listen, you're going to fail. It's part of the failure, right? And you have those conversations, but typically we're not having to talk about race if you're in hockey, for example, right? Billy D, I'm gonna flip over to you because you're older, not old, but older, and have played a long time. You've had a really long career in lacrosse. So why don't you share your first and earliest experiences?
For me, it was kind of like Elijah. I was always the only Black kid that played lacrosse. My older brother played, but besides that, I never saw another Black lacrosse player. I think probably till about 12 years old. But it started pretty harsh right away. I think the first time I was called the N-word was probably around 6 or 7. And growing up in the 80s, when you heard that word, it was just like instant go after the person, right? And I've already had some racism since before that, leading up to that. So for me, it was, instant tears, instant rage, kind of, until the coach came on the floor. Like I just would black out. And unfortunately, that's just how it kind of went for a while. And as a kid, you don't really notice patterns. But, talking to my coach, I after speaking to you the other day, I talked to my coach, and he said definitely there was some other coaches that he was pretty sure would tell their players to, in a tight game to come, call me the N-word. But as a kid, I don't realize that. I'm just like, oh, he called it to me. But it was always talking to him. It's always during, like, we were always winning, or it was a tight game. It was never in the first period, right? So unfortunately, they had a grown up, giving a player a nudge to go say it. So it's pretty disgusting. Absolutely.
Again, I'll read another quote at the end of this. Nelson Mandela talks about, and we all know that racism is taught. But Antwi, you have a slightly different twist or set of early experiences. I think you're on mute. You're on mute, Antwi.
There we go.
There we go.
You got me now?
I got you now.
Yeah, growing up, I did play soccer growing up first, but then I actually, in my basketball years growing up, the first type of racism I actually felt was from people that looked like me. Me being darker and me being complexion-wise and me being from Africa. Back in the early 90s, I'm not that old, but back in the early 90s, it wasn't a cool thing to be from Africa. This is before the Black Panther movie came out. So there was no Wakanda. So I had my own teammates would say racial things towards me because I was darker. And that was the first time I ever felt that type of feeling of the racism. And I came from a strong African household where my father told me to love myself and love being Black and love our culture. So it didn't really hurt me as much. I didn't feel enraged. I kind of felt like everyone else was ignorant. So I kind of felt like I tried to put myself on a higher level than them versus feeling enraged. So it was difficult though, because a lot of my friends were from the islands and from different places. They would always deny being from Africa and would call me certain names to get under my skin. And I stopped letting them get under my skin after a while.
Obviously, parental involvement important and education is important. More stuff that we'll dive into later. But I want to go back to Elijah and Billy D for a minute. Your coaches, and you just touched on it, Billy, you talked about, talking to your coach about it. I kind of want a sense of, and especially for those coaches who may be listening or may have had this brought to them, how were your coaches with it? How did they handle it? And was there an inclusive environment, one that sort of made you comfortable enough to speak on it or to share it? And obviously a lot of this when you were young, but was that something that was sort of brought up and shared?
For me, it was only ever really brought up when it happened, which unfortunately, from I'd say about 8 to 12, it happened quite often. But I feel that I remember my coach trying to say, well, at one point it was just frustrated, him just saying, well, just, be the bigger person. And then to me, it was like, well, then I'm giving up. I'm giving in. You know what I mean? I was like, I got to fight this. But as my teammates, I played with pretty much the same guys growing up as most kids do. So they had my back a lot more than the NHL had the NBA's back. So whenever anything happened, I turned around. Everybody was, fighting, or you were just kids, but everybody was doing the same thing I was, and was mad. And the one thing I remember my coach asking me was like, "Do you want to shake hands?" And we had this thing where no matter what happened, we were going to line up and shake their hands, just to, so you didn't win, you didn't beat me. You know what I'm saying? Even if you beat me in the game, the score, I'm still here. I'm still shaking your hand even after you did what you did to try to, it's my way of saying you didn't hurt me. You know what I mean? Sure. So, absolutely. And then talking to my coach the other day, he was like, should I have done more? And I was like, well, this all just kind of came up in the last year for me, really, the last 2 years. But that's why it's so good to talk about it, because not only is it awareness, it's also, I feel like I'm healing inside. You know what I mean? A lot of stuff has kind of come up as a tidal wave for me personally in the last 3-4 years. So just to have this conversation is great.
Yeah, that's excellent. And that's a super important point. Elijah, why don't you touch on that from your coach's standpoint and the environment that was created for you?
Yeah, I think right away when I got traded from Kitchener to Niagara, my coach did a really good job of just making sure I was comfortable. He would talk to me a lot, make sure I'm comfortable with my billets. As for a lot of people know, it could be a hard adjustment just moving in with a family you don't know, especially being with a Black family, and then you go to different food, different cultures. It is a little bit of a change, but he made sure he did a really good job of making sure we were close. And then from a teammate standpoint, Akil Thomas, he was a third-year guy at the time, but he was one of the leaders on our team. And me and him kind of talked a lot about how we can just make sure that the whole team culture as a whole was really tight. And, I think same as Billy said, with all my teammates, if anything went down, they were the first ones to have both of our backs. And that when you see that, it says a lot for you, and it makes you feel a lot more comfortable.
Important. And I guess I'll say for people listening, because I know in my experiences, even as an adult, as a professional adult, you've heard, hey, just deal with it, or, advice for athletes, hey, just, have them, toughen up their skin and those types of things. So this is not like just losing a basketball game, right? It's a little bit different. No, it's a lot different. And it impacts you in different ways. Now, we know that not anyone on this, in these 4 squares right now would or has, sort of uses race or blames, the idea or racism in general for missed opportunities or, lack of success, because everyone's been successful and has figured out their way. We've all navigated, but obviously many don't. And so one other thing I'll say is that race, and I should have said this early, is a social construct. For those who don't understand, that's a fancy way of saying it's made up, right? It's not like biological, like, men and women, it's made up. And so, as humans, we sort of put ourselves in boxes, because that's what we do as coaches, as players, everyone gets put in boxes. So I think that's important to say. And so just to keep it simple, it's made up. With that said, how has it impacted your careers? And Antwi, I'll start with you. Have you seen or do you feel like there are ways, circumstances, instances where race has impacted? I mean, I guess the answer is yes to that, but tell us about that in terms of how it's impacted your career.
Well, to be honest with you, it impacted my career, especially going into college, because I always felt that ever since high school, when I played for a white coach, he couldn't really relate to me as much. So the college I chose was Arizona State because Rob Evans and Coach Benford were both black. And when I chose that school, I went there because I felt they can deal with me and they can relate to me more. They're more relatable. And I had my amazing year in my first year playing under their tutelage. Then once I had the coaching change and Coach Sendip came in and he was a white coach, did more of a Princeton offense, I feel immediately there was a disconnect. And whether it was subconscious or consciously, I felt like that played a big role in my career moving forward because I never ever connection with him like I would have had with a coach.
That's excellent. And you're starting to sort of touch on the idea of implicit bias. Play some cool games around that. Billy D, talk to me about, how you sort of felt your race has impacted your career. Sorry, let me interrupt you 1 second. Talk to me about the penalties. How about that? That's a pretty good one. Talk to me about that.
The penalties, I'd say 25% of them were deserved. No, that was my style. I was just a rough, aggressive player. And I didn't really want to let that enter my mind space that I was getting some penalties because I was big and black. But it was echoed amongst the league. Like there were times we had this new defensive scheme, and it's like anytime I hit someone, even where the other players were like, I'm walking to the penalty box and they're looking at me like, man, that was a bad call. But again, I don't want to have that as an excuse, but it was just, I don't know. It's hard to say for me. I've had two black refs kind of ref me my whole way up. And they were kind of always like, hey, giving me a nudge, just keep playing, keep doing your thing. I'll never forget when I made Team Canada. Martin called me and was like, man, I'm so proud of you. Just make your mark. You beat all the odds, So I knew there was, if me and another guy get into it, chances are I'm going to get the instigator. And I was okay with it because my coach was okay with it. He was a native guy and he had my back and we were, really, really tight. And I always had that comfortable feeling where I could just play my game, whether, even if I was going to get called, we didn't change from it. We were just like, we're doing the right thing, win or lose. Might have got him fired. But yeah, that's a tough question for me. I just, I kind of just put my head down and did my thing, and I never let them really get to me,
Yeah, it's hard. Listen, I wasn't always so good at that. Those who know me from my Brock days, man, I really struggled with that. I'll be honest. I struggled with it because I knew it wasn't just about the game. And I had the same things. I would have officials come to me before games and say, hey, like, just be aware of this. Or, you get that warning before the game. Or you have the other end of people saying, hey, are you going to behave tonight? Like taunting you, like you're some, caged animal, right? Like, so it's certainly, as I get older, I'm a little calmer, I think, but definitely, part of that was like carrying that weight. Part of my intensity was knowing that I couldn't fail, like knowing that we had to be good and to overcome it. Because if you weren't going to be good, if my team, we weren't very good when I took over, but, obviously eventually we were really good. If we had never gotten to that place, it would have not been good. Like, it would have been, oh, well, you're only upset because you're losing, which is what I heard a lot in the first 2 years. And then we were winning and I was still, what now? Right. And so I think that's an important one. And I'm glad you brought that up because, hey, by the way, I deserve some of those technicals. But I certainly know that a lot of the treatment, not all of the treatment was had anything to do with the game. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. So Elijah, talk to me about that.
Yeah, I think for me, one thing my dad always said to me, we talked a little bit about this before, is be so great that they don't have a choice. But I do think you could be that great and maybe somebody doesn't pick you because of your race. In the NHL, there's 31 teams. There could be one GM who says, I don't want that black kid on my team. And because of that, maybe you miss out on an opportunity. So I couldn't say there's something so obvious that because of my race, I haven't gotten an opportunity, but you don't really know who you're dealing with. Like if the other GM's racist, there could be 5 racist GMs out of the 31 in the league, and then right away that's an opportunity gone. So for me, I haven't, like I said, it hasn't been anything obvious, but there is that always kind of sticks in my mind. And then even with my career going forward, part of why I chose to go to Ryerson is because I had a black friend on my team, a good friend of mine who was going there. They already had 2 black players on the team, and you feel a little bit more comfortable when you have that around you. And just Toronto as a whole, it's a lot of different cultures, and that really just attracted me to want to go there.
Listen, representation matters, whether we like it or not, whether we want to admit it or not. I think it's interesting. We're really comfortable, or we're becoming more and more and more comfortable with saying, hey, we need more women in sport, or we need more women and we should, like, by all means, rightfully so. Because why? Because representation matters, right? And so I think that applies all across the board, and even amongst women, representation within them, sort of those intersects, understanding that not all women are the same and getting the same opportunities. And so I think that those intersects and intersectionality becomes important. And we're sort of touching on, the unseen microaggressions, right? I describe them as death by 1,000 cuts, like they're not like the knife in your back and, oh, you bleed out. It's like little pokes, little jabs, little, hey, are you going to behave tonight? Little comments that are made on a regular basis. And it's kind of what we're all describing here. Procter & Gamble has this really cool video out. I don't know if anyone's seen it. And if you haven't, have a look at it. It's called The Look. And it kind of takes you through the day in the life of a black man. And he wakes up. It starts from the moment he wakes up, and he takes his kid to the pool, and people are staring at him, and he wherever he goes, he kind of goes through what everyone's describing here. I think it's really worth a look, so everyone should have a look at that. But let's shift a little bit to what do people do? Like, not in terms of small, medium, large, because we'll get into that, but the importance of speaking up, activism, having allies. Antwi, I'm going to start with you. How important is that? How important is it for all of us, black, white, or otherwise, to have allies, to speak up, coaches to stand up for their athletes and athletes and people in general?
Oh, it's extremely important. I'll go to an example when I was in college again. We had an assistant coach, Coach Dietrich Taylor, who's now a head coach at Cal State Fullerton. And there's one day when Coach Sender came in, and he was really, really just pestering me and trying to figure out a way to get on my nerves. And he said, all of a sudden, you can't wear Jordans next game. No more Jordans, no more headbands. We're not doing that. And that was the first day when Coach Taylor looked at me like, you know what? You're being stereotypical now, and I'm going to stand up with Tweet. And that was the first time a coach or anybody that looked like me stood up for me. And I felt that power and that pride. And I feel like it's extremely important, especially for athletes or just anyone in a position of power or leadership, to find allies together and to stand together and give that same mission and the same goal. Because it's strength in numbers, and the more we can give that message out there, the more it can be heard.
Billy, you in talking to you, one of my favorite stories is so interesting about sort of this idea of microaggressions and people speaking up, was about when you were featured in a magazine. Can you tell us that story?
Oh yeah, at Inside Lacrosse magazine, which was like the magazine in the early 2000s, and I heard that I had a feature, big, full page spread, and I'll never forget, in the little block they had, he's super aggressive, he can score goals, and then it said something like he can walk the walk and talk the talk like a good old thug, and I'll never forget, and I'll be like, wait a second, I was so like, and then a thug, then I got a couple phone calls like, hey, you see the article? And I'm like, yeah. And then I was kind of trying to play it off, but to this day, it's just like, everybody's like, well, if you were white, I don't think they'd be calling you a thug, and it was hurtful. It was my second year in the league. I was up for running the All-Star game, up for Defensive Player of the Year, you know, living my dream. And then it just felt like, you know, a rewind. You know what I mean? It was just like, oh, this again. So that was it was an eye opener, you know, and it makes you put your back up, right? It makes you kind of on edge, because I just I think at that time too, you know, 21 years old, it's just not fair. You know what I mean? And nothing was done about it. I think nowadays the writer would probably get in trouble. You know what I mean? You never know. But I even wish, even what we were just talking about, I wish I could have spoke up more then. You know what I mean? I'm kind of ashamed that I didn't, but you know, as a coach now, you know, I'll make sure I do moving forward, and that's why these panels are so good. Just because these conversations are happening, whereas before it was just like, you know, you dealt with it and you moved on, right?
Yeah,
But yeah,
I mean,
I guess I played lacrosse like a thug.
let's go back to that. You dealt with it and you moved on, and let's be clear. You didn't ever get to deal with it, and you never really moved on, right?
No.
I think everybody around you who didn't want to deal with it moved on from it because it didn't really impact them directly. But you had to go home with it, you know, all of these years later, remember it, and it bothers you, and it should, right? Absolutely, it should.
Sure.
And that's why it's so important. It's part of the reason why we started this company, was to help educate people, because it, you know, it's an idea. The idea that we may think that, hey, well, I don't have a, you know, I'm not racist, or I don't have a biased bone in my body. Well, I have news for everybody listening. Here we go. Bold statement alert. We all have biases. We all do. All of us. We all have them. Don't run from them. Embrace them. Understand them. Right? Understand how they manifest themselves through your actions and in your words. And even when you're not trying to be, you know, discriminatory or any of the rest, I think it's important that you understand them and you start to get a hold of them, learn to control them, right? Because you talked about Antwi, you talked about a Princeton offense. When people think that, for those who don't know, well, most people know Princeton, but they're not associating it with a young black kid from Toronto, right? And so those ideas of who fits that, you know, like in basketball, it's like the point guard is I use an example from Donovan Bennett of Sportsnet. It's always like, you know, when they talk about, you know, football players, you know, the black, you know, wide receiver is super athletic, and they focus on his sort of physical attributes when he makes a play. But the Julian Edelman, who I love, you know, is a good player, white football player. They talk about his headiness and how his acumen and how smart he is. When you listen to the broadcasting, right, there's sort of an implicit bias there that even those with the most of education aren't aware of or aren't thinking about. So I think that's an important piece to note. Elijah, take us through the importance of activism and speaking up. And where are you at now? I mean, this is interesting because you're a little bit younger, right? At 21. Billy D won't say how old you are. You're 30 again, right? And so you guys kind of grew up in different times, right? I mean, essentially, right? I mean, I think Jada won't say how old she is, but like there's some younger people, and things are so different. Like, right? And I'm 39. Things are so different than, you know, how Elijah's handling it, right? So, you know, I was angry too, right? And I'm with you. And Elijah's like, he's got it, you know, he's figured it out a little bit better than we did at his stage, right?
100%.
And so Elijah, talk to us, you know, 100%. Sort of from your group, you as well, right, Antwi? So talk to us from sort of your stage in terms of, you know, activism, speaking out. I mean, you started a podcast, for example, right? I wouldn't have done that at 21. That's your form of speaking out. That's really impressive. So, and it shouldn't be. It should be. I'm not gonna treat it as impressive because I'm gonna normalize that for you because that's just who you are. But talk about the importance of speaking out in activism in sport, not the you know, shut up and play. I think I saw it again this morning in the NFL. You know, shut up and play. Why shouldn't we shut up and play?
Yeah, it's super important, especially kind of what you said, how Billy and I and Antwi we're living in different times, and you know, I think it's because of guys like Billy and Antwi and Mike Marson, Willie O'Ree, why I am able to start a podcast. And you know, the people who've been through this before me, them speaking up, sharing their stories, allows me to feel comfortable doing it. And the fact that there's so many young people who want to get into hockey or something, and maybe they just need to hear from me or somebody else and hear my stories or hear how I could help them. And there was I think I was 15 years old, and there was a young black kid who was just getting started in hockey, and his dad kind of reached out to my dad and asked if I can give his kid any advice. And that was something that really stuck with me for a long time. And it's like, there's a million other people. Why is this kid asking me? But the fact that he did come and ask me was like, wow, I need to have my voice heard. I need to help many people. And I kind of compare it to the voting, like the election we just had. Even if I can only help one person, it's still one person that I'm helping. And I think it's important to speak out just because of that. If through my podcast, if I do it for the next 20 years, the next week, if I can reach even just one person, then for me, I'm making a difference. And I think that's what it's all about.
Absolutely. I love that. And I started my podcast, think about it for the exact same reasons. Do you want to tell them a little bit more about your podcast, who you're doing it with, and how that sort of came about?
Yeah. So Kwame Damon Mason, he directed that movie Soul on Ice. We do it with him. And then Akil Thomas played for Niagara. A lot of people remember him as the guy who scored the goal for Canada World Juniors game-winning goal. So Keel and I played Niagara for a bit together. Right away, we become really good friends. And we were just in class one day, and we were kind of talking, like, how can we reach some of our fans, some other people? What's something that we can do? And we thought of maybe a YouTube channel or streaming video games. But overall, we decided to do a podcast. And, we brainstormed a lot. How are we going to do it? What's going to go behind it? And after George Floyd was murdered and a few other things, and you can just see how divided the world was and how much people needed to speak out. We kind of thought it was the perfect time to speak out and have our voices heard, and we've just kind of been running with it since then.
I love it. Antwi, your whole world is about giving back and, helping others, and you're ridiculously dynamic. Talk a little bit about, sort of what you're doing, how you're using your voice, how you're using your platform to advance things in our society.
Well, I have a non-for-profit organization in my own city that I grew up in, Rexdale, called Youth Are Us. Also with Noir, which means Black on Black Excellence. We do most programs, and most of our merchandise significance most tells you about your journey. Like my King shirt has Malcolm, Martin, Muhammad, Kwame, and Nkrumah, and it says King. So now a kid or someone from a different organization or an area in the city gets to read and be like, who's Kwame Nkrumah? And now they get to learn about it. So I like a lot of the stuff I like to do. I like to kind of put the medicine in the dessert and feed it to people that way. And most of my give back is I just want to make it a better place for when I was growing up. Because when I was growing up, I didn't see many people looking like me doing things that I wanted to do. Most of the guys I grew up around were into different things. So now I want to be able to be that vessel for the younger generation to kind of get information, get intel, and any way I can give them resources, I'm there for them.
Such a beautiful thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Billy, your team, you guys have created an inclusion and empowerment table talks. Can you tell us about that and how your involvement in that?
It's out in Halifax. It's just anybody in the community. We have natives, anybody of all walks of lives are just gonna, have a table talk every week about racism, about experiences. And I think first and foremost, it's just, there is no bad conversation, and like you said the other day, everybody's got a different lens, and it's time that people start looking through other people's lenses. Yeah, and we're just getting that going next week, and I'm all new to this, so I'm just looking to get involved and make a difference like these two. It's incredible.
Yeah,
I just wrote down the medicine and the dessert. I'm going to be using that for a while. That's a gem right there.
It's beautiful. Listen, this is how I end every podcast. I end it with a small, medium, large concept. It has become the sort of the staple of the podcast. It's the part that everyone loves because it's actionable items, right? It's things that people can, small, medium, large things people can do to affect change, right? And I want to go through that with you all. I want to let's start with Elijah. let's start with you and your small, medium, large things people can do. You've all just talked about what you're already doing. What can other people do? How can they get involved? How can they educate themselves? And again, let me be clear. This is not a black issue. Racism isn't just an indigenous issue, right? Like, this is everybody's issue. It's all of our issues to solve. Just like, advancing, issues for women. That's everybody's. It's not just for women to figure out. It's for men to figure out. It's for all of us to figure out. So Elijah, you're up. One sentence per thought. Give me small, medium, large. Go.
Start the conversation for small, or open a book, do something. It doesn't need to be a lot, whether you want to talk to a family member, go read a book, read a blog, whatever it is, just start the conversation, start learning about it. So that's for small. For medium, I think there's organizations that you can get in touch with, figure out how you can help, whether it's donating your time, donating money. That's something you can do. And I think for the large, if you look at what all four of us have, we went out, started a podcast. You can go protest. There's lots of different things that you can do for the large. And, whether you're starting with the small, starting with the medium, starting with the large, it's just important to start somewhere.
Much appreciated. Thank you very much. Antwi, I'm going to go to you next.
Amazing, Elijah, and Billy. The big first thing I would say, if you want to get started, ask Siri. Go on Google and figure out some research. That's the first thing you do. And do not be embarrassed of your ignorance. All of us are ignorant to something. Be open-minded. That's on a small portion. On the medium side, I would like to say, put an action towards it. Learn the knowledge, and then figure out a way to put an action towards it, because knowledge isn't power. The knowledge applied is power. You can have not all the knowledge in the world. If you don't apply it, you're just as ignorant as a person without the knowledge. And on a large scale, I would say apply it to the level where now you can teach it to somebody who's ignorant. And now you started a chain. We went from not knowing it, researching it, asking Siri. We go from finding the knowledge and getting the action towards it. And now we're so educated in this form that we can now teach it to someone else, because when you teach, you learn. So that's my small, medium, and large.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, Antwi. And Billy, last but not least.
For me, I would say small is have a conversation with somebody that has a different opinion, than you. Something, a social injustice that bothers you, that you're not comfortable about. Medium, I would say, have a conversation with a few people, maybe some family members, some friends that normally you wouldn't be comfortable about. And then large, I would say this, get to know some people that you don't know. Have a conversation with a panel, put something out there, on Twitter, and just have a healthy conversation, and just know that different opinions are okay. You know what I mean? You don't have to live through someone else's opinion. Just hear their opinion, do whatever you want with it, but just know that it's okay. People come from different experiences, so they're going to have different opinions. I feel like I had to get off the internet for a while because I was getting all hyped up during the Black Lives Matters. And I'm like, well, some guy in Wisconsin's got a different experience than me in St. Catharines, Ontario, right? So it's okay. And I think once you realize that, you become healthier, and it's just good to have a conversation.
Yeah, I love that. I think I've had some really great conversations with some of my old colleagues in all the different careers I've had. And mine are always, educate, because that's important. Then conversate, right? Like talk up, like the same as you guys, and then speak up, right? So it's one thing to have conversations amongst us, but the hardest thing with all of that is to stand up and say something. It's hard to be vulnerable and share. And I guess I'll leave with this. Nelson Mandela, once again, that education is the most powerful tool which can be used to change the world. Let there be work, bread, water, and salt for all. No one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin or his background or his religion. And so educate, get to learn what the issues are. These are important issues. These aren't 1 hour training sessions. These are everyday conversations. We got to develop these into habits, daily rituals, the way you get up and exercise is the way you have to get up and exercise your brain and educate yourself to thinking about life through a different lens. It's time for change. And with that said, I want to thank Elijah. I want to thank Antwi. I want to thank Billy for being here today, for sharing your time, for sharing your experiences. I think I learned a lot. I'm sure if you watch for 30 seconds, you learned something, and it was incredibly valuable. I also want to thank Jada for putting this on, and obviously, as I thanked you earlier, I know you did a lot of work to get this thing going. I look forward to Tabitha's performance after this. And Jada, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Yeah, I just want to say a big thank you to all four of you for taking the time out of all of your busy schedules to not only come together tonight, but the meetings beforehand, take the time. Just it's obvious that you all are so passionate about it. And it was just great listening to you guys here. I could listen to you guys all night, make my job easy. So but yeah, thanks again for all of your time. I appreciate all of you. I hope the audience took the time to learn something, to listen, and to consider how they can take those action items you gave out and implement them in their own lives. So thanks again. I will start to move you guys off, and I'll talk to you guys soon.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Okay. So now I am very happy to introduce Tabitha Lewis. She's been writing her own lyrics and producing her own music for over 15 years, and she's even shared her gifts locally at Matai Cafe. Currently, she works at the Brock University Makerspace as the coordinator and instructor, and she infuses her creativity and passion for music into teaching and learning. So I will put Tabitha up on here with me. Hi, Tabitha.
Hey, Jada.
I'll pass it off to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me, everyone. I'm just going to share a couple of songs with you this evening. And the two songs that I chose really, when I was thinking of songs for this evening, I thought about, kind of the full circle feeling that you might feel when you think about racism in any area. I know for a while when you said that, you've experienced racism, some people would think that, you were making it up or it wasn't true. But these two songs really kind of talk to some of the feelings that you might feel if you were on the other side of racism. So I hope you enjoy it. I remember when I lost my mind. There was something so special about that place. Even your emotions had an echo in so much space. And when you're out there without a care, I was out of touch. And it wasn't because I didn't know enough. I just knew too much. Does that make me crazy? Does that make me crazy? Does that make me crazy? Possibly. And I hope you have the time of your life. But think twice. That's my only advice. Come on now, who do you think you are? Ha ha ha, bless your soul. You really think you're in control? 'Cause I think you're crazy. I I think you're crazy. I think you're crazy, just like me. And my heroes had a heart to lose their lives out on a limb. And I remember thinking, I want to be just like them. Ever since I was little, it looked like fun. And there was no coincidence I've come. And die when I'm done. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe we're crazy. Probably. I am not the things my family did. I am not the voices in my head. I am not the pieces of brokenness inside. I am light. 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 I'm not the mistakes that I have made, or any of the things that cause me pain. I am not the pieces of my dream left behind. I am light. 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 I am not the color of my eyes. I am not the skin on the outside. I am not my age. I am not my race. my soul inside is all light. Is all light. I am light, I am light. I am light, I am light. I am divinity defined. I am God on the inside. I am a star, a piece of it all. My soul is light. It is light. It is light. Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening.
Thank you so much, Tabitha. We're so happy to have you join us. What a beautiful voice. I just want to thank you all for tuning in wherever you are. And I did see a comment from Mary. This video will live on YouTube. So if anybody couldn't make it tonight, you can share the link or you can go back and watch again if you want, but it will live on. So yeah, thank you so much for tuning in. I encourage you to check out our website at FirstOntarioPAC.ca. There's a lot of great events coming up, some in-person events. So definitely check that out. And wherever you are, I hope you are safe and we'll see you again soon. Good night.